Okay, welcome to this short presentation on yoga therapy, what it is and how it works. So, what is yoga therapy? There's many definitions of yoga therapy, and in some ways, you might say that all yoga is therapeutic. However, within the sort of large field of yoga, we can see that it's used for different purposes in different settings. And so yoga therapy, as defined by the International Association of Yoga Therapists, is the professional application of the principles and practices of yoga to promote health and well-being within a therapeutic relationship that includes personalized assessment, goal setting, lifestyle management, and yoga practices for individuals or small groups. And so, really, yoga therapy focuses on wellness. And so, I've got two different definitions of wellness here, one from the Sushruta Samhita, one who is established in the self, who has balanced doshas, balanced Agni, properly formed dhatus, proper elimination of malas, well functioning bodily processes, and whose mind, soul, and senses are full of bliss is called healthy. And so, this is a traditional definition of health that we're all familiar with. And we're going to sort of break that down throughout this presentation to understand that from a yoga therapeutic perspective. But I also put up here the definition of health from the World Health Organization to show how, um, traditional definitions of health from an yogic and Ayurvedic perspective are really complementary to modern healthcare and modern definitions of health. And so we can see in the World Health Organization that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So, a fairly progressive definition of health. And so it's important to look at health as being integrative and healthcare as being integrative. And so here we're identifying two specific orientations towards health. Salutogenesis is really the domain of yogic healthcare practices, and it's contrasted with pathogenesis. So, salutogenesis is a perspective in health and social science that focuses on factors that support human health and well being rather than simply focusing on disease and illness. It explores how individuals and communities can develop and maintain health even in the face of stress and adversity by leveraging their resources and strength. One of the things I love here is it shows that health is not just an individual concern, but a community concern as well, because we know we can create the best healthcare plan, but if we don't also look at community resources or community support, that fidelity to that plan can be a challenge for individuals. Pathogenesis, on the other hand, refers to the mechanisms and development of disease, outlining how an illness originates, progresses, and potentially resolves. It's the study of the origins of sickness, focusing on the processes that lead to a disease state. So you can see how these are complementary, and we're going to look at the next slide about how these actually fit on a spectrum. So we call this here the illness wellness continuum, right? So if you look at the bottom there with the two arrows, you can see in the middle is the neutral point where there's no discernible illness or wellness, right? And then, of course, stressors come in and they can either lead towards illness, or they can be used to work towards wellness. And so we see illness and wellness as a spectrum or a continuum. And so pathogenesis focuses on sort of the negative side of that spectrum, what's causing a disease state, how can we avoid disease. It's reactive, again, to a disease state. It's against pain or loss. So in other words, like, it is trying to mitigate pain or loss, and it helps us to stay alive. So very important. But salutogenesis is the opposite side of that spectrum, considers what enables health, How can we reach our potential? It's more proactive. It promotes gains or growth, and it helps us to live our life fully. And so you can see there's a circle in the middle because, in some stages of our illness wellness continuum, we'll be focusing on salutogenesis as preventive or moving towards optimal health. But then in the presence of disease states, then we might have a more genetic perspective. A key feature of yoga therapy is whole person wellness. And so this is really well exemplified by the Panchakosha model, which allows us to work with a person in a way that considers health as an integrated process across all domains that contribute to a person's sense of well being. And so I think it's important to recognize here that when we're talking about wellness and well-being from a salutogenic perspective, we even have room for people who are living in states of chronic disease or have terminal conditions, because we're trying to transform their relationship to that circumstance, to that illness, so that they can experience a sense of well-being. And so the person has a subjective perspective that can sort of transform their sense of well being. And of course, when we look at all of these various domains of health, we realize how interrelated they are. We know that illness or disease oftentimes starts on the subtle level before it gets rooted in the body. And so we have the opportunity to start wellness on the subtle levels and to address wellness on the subtle levels before it manifests in disease. The yogic understanding of disease. So again, we look at this as a process of imbalance, and we focus on the trigunas, the tridoshas, including the five elements, the various qualities of the doshas, and the subdoshas and their locations. We also look at the vital energies in the body and the condition of the various tissues. And all of this assessment is what allows us to come up with a care plan that is adaptive and individualized. And so this process is called yoga chikitsa. So yoga chikitsa focuses on health beyond the disease state. It promotes the dynamic equilibrium of the person at all levels. The goal of yoga chikitsa is to reduce suffering, to restore function, improve adaptability, and awaken inner potential, and understands wellness as not the mere absence of illness, but a state of holistic harmony. And so you can see that the tools that we use to do this would be asana. The various asanas have different mechanisms of effect throughout the various systems of the body. We use pranayama to work on the breath and the energetic body, all of those vital energies, mudra as well to direct energy through the body, dharana and dhyana to help to focus the mind and address various mental states, as well as yogic lifestyle and philosophical and psycho-spiritual concepts. It's important to recognize from a spiritual perspective that when we are being person-centered, we are not we're not expecting the person to adopt any set of beliefs, but rather we are working with them to find their own sense of meaning in their circumstances, which is transformative in nature. We can help them to see a larger view that can transform their relationship to their state of health. And finally, yoga therapy is person-centered and evidence-informed, right? So what do we mean by that? Person-centered care is a collaborative approach to healthcare between a client and a therapist, right? So it takes into account the client's circumstances and input to adapt a care plan that client's individual needs. And in the development of this care plan, evidence-informed approaches take into account evidence as they come to us from traditions and research, experience of both the client and the therapist, right? So we all have a history. From the client perspective, they have a history of their own sort of family history, their own social history, their own health history. And the therapist, we have the experience of working with multiple clients over over time. And then, of course, the expertise of the client and the therapist. So the client may have some expertise in a healthcare field, but certainly they are the expert in their own body and mind. And so we want to make sure that that's included. And of course, the expertise of the therapist comes from our training. And of course, the main thing is establishing the therapeutic relationship. And so the expertise of the therapist is really what sort of is the container for that relationship. But it doesn't replace the relationship. So we remain in a person-centered place rather than driven by the the therapist's expertise. And finally, what is the use of evidence informed approaches? Well, these ground the therapist's expertise in research rather than bias and or conjecture. So we know that in many cases there may be personal bias on the part of the therapist or conjecture, misinformation that's floating around because this is an ongoing developmental field. And so it's important that we stay aligned with the latest research and that we have knowledge of sort of what constitutes good research as we are coming up with mechanisms to help us create a care plan. Being evidence informed also helps us to lend credibility to the work that we do. This would be important, let's say, if we wanted to become an organization, a company that does research in the future, or works with other healthcare professions. And of course, it allows us to show the impact of the work that we do. So, keeping good documentation of the protocols that we develop and the care plans that we offer allows us to sort of perhaps do future work once we start collecting data on our clients, or we have some sort of a data pool, so that we can start to show that the protocols that we've developed can be controlled for and researched and proven to be effective. And then the other thing, even though we're talking a lot about evidence and research, from a client's perspective, they really need to have a subjective sense of well-being. They need to have faith in the protocols and faith in their own abilities to to reach and maintain a state of wellness or optimal health. And so having research to show a client can oftentimes offer them an objective measure that will instill faith in them who may be new to yoga therapy or resistant or unsure. And so, if we can give them some type of evidence, that can be really helpful in their process of going through these modalities. So I hope this helps. It's a sort of a brief overview of what are the elements of yoga therapy and the perspective and understanding of yoga therapy. And of course, there's much more to be discussed and explored together as we are on this journey. Thank you so much for viewing this video.